It pays to take risks, and Gus Malzahn is a risk taker.
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me, as he will every single Monday, is my guy, Thrift Barringer from Sports Visions Radio. Thrift, Malzahn did the unthinkable. He started his four-string quarterback after picking up KJ Jefferson in the portal, and he balled out.
This was the most Gus Malzahn performance I've ever seen. And it reminds me of those years in Auburn in which he'll have a slow start. And at some point in the season, whether it be a bad season like what's happening this year, or a season maybe they start 0-2 and went on a 7-game winning streak, at some point there's going to be a game in which everything clicks. The offense looks like a juggernaut, and they just demolish an opponent. And this by far was the best game of the season for UCF. And of course, his offense looks looked efficient and looked great this past weekend. That I would not expect anything different from Gus Malzahn. That's the only thing I can say, Mike.
Yeah, it was classic Gus. Now look, last week he got in at the end of the game versus BYU. And he went 6 for 10 for 102 yards and a touchdown. And fans were in my mentions, Thrift, saying it was the second string defense. You can't make anything of it. I hate that argument because when you're a guy, especially in a risk position, and you get your shot, you don't have any control over when you get your shot. You have to take advantage of the time that you're given, and he did. Now, there was a lot of speculation during the week. Could he really do this? Could he, after recruiting an SEC starting KJ Jefferson, ditching him midseason, going to the backup and to the freshman, could he really have the guts to start his fourth-string quarterback on such a small sample size? Because let's be clear, Thrift, this isn't about anything Rizk did in practice.
No.
Really. That's not how he won the job. He won that job in the fourth quarter of that BYU game.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And again, when you start seeing a guy perform the way he just did, and albeit to a team that's obviously not having a great year in Arizona, they're 3-6 now, but that's neither here nor there. In his first collegiate start to put up the numbers, and I know we'll talk about the numbers here in just a moment, this is something that probably he had the entire year, and it makes you wonder, why wasn't his opportunity coming sooner? Was this something that Gus wanted to hold close to his vest, knowing that he has this kind of like Lamborghini in the shop that he was waiting to go out and take a test drive with? And finally, when he does, the offense looks immaculate. So I'm with you. It's not off of just one practice. This was last week, seeing glimpses of what the future of UCF could be. And right now, this guy could basically be saving Gus Malzahn's job, Mike.
Yeah, I think that Rizk could be the next great story in college football. Now, we say this all the time here on Locked On UCF. Talent evaluation is not an exact science. I think that stars have ruined college football a little in terms of how we look at players. So If a guy is in a 5-star, he is in a high 4-star, if he's not a top 50 guy, it's like, oh, well, he was just a 3-star. Well, you know what? A lot of guys overlooked this kid, and he was on this roster. He made a college roster, so he can play. Now, you can't get to this level and not be able at least to play to some extent. But he got his shot, and you can't control when you get your shot. I was happy to see that he took advantage of his shot, and I was even happier to see that the coaches had the balls, Thrift, to put him out there and say, you know what? We're 3-5, and what do we have to lose? Because Jefferson didn't work out. Jacurri's throwing interceptions, and EJ's not ready. He looked like a little Johnny Manziel running around out there with the football.
Yeah, or today's modern day Diego Pavia. And you made mention about quarterbacks that don't get the limelight and now proving a lot of people wrong. Look at Diego Pavia. There is multiple teams in the Power 5 conferences, specifically the Big Ten and the SEC, that Diego could be starting for right now. And you're seeing what he's doing with Vanderbilt, now leading them to 6-3. And and they're ranked right now, Mike. But the fact what Dylan did, being efficient, but being electric with his feet, this is the prototypical, how do I make Gus Malzahn offense flow, Nick Marshall-esque type of quarterback Gus has been looking for since even going back to his Auburn days. And again, I know it's a one game, and I'm not trying to spew out a bunch of fiery hot takes, but what I just saw this past weekend, how can you not be fired up for the future of UCF football?
Yeah, before we move on, let's get to the numbers here. Dylan Rizk 20 for 25 on the day for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had an average time to throw of 2.69 seconds. He had an adjusted completion percentage of 87%. Man. This was a dynamic performance. He threw 4 passes of 20 or more yards down the field. Thrift, he completed 3 of them. From 10 to 20 yards, he was 3 of 4 there. And inside 10 yards, he only had 1 incomplete pass over the short middle. He was perfect behind the line of scrimmage. This was an absolute dynamic performance by Dylan Rizk. And I will say this. It's exact with RJ Harvey in the backfield. It's the type of performance you need from your quarterback. He did, look, 300 yards is a great, and 3 TDs is a great day. But, so that we're clear, this is the RJ Harvey show. And what you need is this kind of performance from your quarterback so that teams cannot stack the box against RJ. I think Saturday he moved into the 2nd spot in all of college football in terms of rushing.
Yeah. 8.4 yards a carry, Mike. Only 22 carries, and he had 184 yards, let alone if he had got to 30. If this game wasn't already over with by the 3rd quarter, he may have eclipsed the 200-yard mark. Great job managing this offense, but not just managing it, making plays. And when you're an offense, after that first missed field goal, 7 consecutive drives that ended in a touchdown. You can't get better than that, man. I know the Hail Mary at the end of the half kind of pretty much cemented how this game was going to go for Arizona. But that was just one play that it was like, because, when you see these type of performances, Mike, you start thinking bad defense. Is he just throwing the ball up into wide open receivers, busted secondary? I honestly think this was just a well-managed game by a quarterback than it was a bad defensive performance by Arizona. Now, it wasn't great, obviously, but I give more credit to UCF than I am taking credit away and saying, man, that was terrible performance from Arizona.
Absolutely. Look, this was the space game, and it's an important UCF has never lost it. So this was an important game for them. I think it set the tone for the rest of their season, maybe has them primed to make a bowl game, which I think would be an absolute win for Gus Malzahn. Look, somebody had to call the plays for Dylan Rizk. And after a word from our sponsors, we're going to talk about Tim Harris's big day calling plays. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you, Thrift, by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Do you ever need energy in the middle of the day? I know you had a long day.
Yeah, I fall asleep every time around 2 or 3 o'clock. I'm getting sleepy. I need something to wake me up because I'm not even halfway through the day yet, Mike.
Well, look, our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby. It's a way of life, Thrift. It takes a lot of energy to power through all the daily tailgates and touchdowns and football shows that we're recording, which is why they've created the Stand, the 5 Hour Energy shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like everybody listening to this podcast. The fans who are first in the parking lot are the last to leave. And we see you here at 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand, the 5 Hour Energy shot, is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5 Hour Energy. Thrift, Gus handed over play calling to Tim Harris. And boy, did he call a hell of a game. Now, opponent should be considered, but it was important for UCF to start fast in this one because Arizona has probably the best wide receiver in college football, and Tetairoa McMillan on the other side of the field. Now, they were able to limit him to some extent in this game, but man, what a day calling plays for Tim Harris.
Yeah, you couldn't get – it seemed like everything that he dialed up was the right call. You couldn't get more efficient, and the play calling and the timing of it. I think that's the biggest thing, because there's a lot of great plays, but if you don't call it at the right time, it doesn't matter, and the execution usually won't pan out as well. What we saw from Tim Harris was what UCF needed. And honestly, maybe it's time now that Gus understands that he's more of a CEO and allow his guys like Tim Harris, who's a up-and-coming coach, be successful at calling plays, and maybe he's better at adapting to these Big 12 defenses, because what I saw last week, if that happened 3 or 4 weeks prior, we may be talking a different story about how Central Florida season is going this year. And by the way, I just want to throw this out there. You said the space game. I love these uniforms, by the way.
They're amazing, aren't they?
I hope they bring them back. These things were a thing of beauty. I thoroughly enjoyed them. But this was the Tim Harris game, and he got every one of his players, including the freshman fourth-string quarterback, all playing at elite level. This guy's a rising star for sure, and hopefully if you're Central Florida, throw the interim tag off of it. Let this guy be the offensive coordinator for many years to come.
Now, it was a big day for Gus. He fired Ted Roof on Monday. Yep. He turned over play calling, and he decided to start his fourth-string quarterback. Now, look, it takes trust. It takes trust to turn over play calling, especially for an offensive head coach like Gus. And we've seen this before in his career. He's always gone back and forth about this. But to me, it speaks volumes to the trust that he has in Tim Harris to turn over play calling.
Yeah, it does, man. And I got to give him credit, because like you said, these coaches, especially guys that how they got to where they are, is having either an old school mindset like a Nick Saban, we've talked about him before, or like a Gus Malzahn, obviously being an offensive guru that had him one of the hottest names in college football back in 2013. That's tough to say, man, I am not doing a good job play calling. Maybe I am not fit to be the play caller when that has been your go-to bread and butter as a coach for all these years. I got to give him credit, and a lot of coaches don't have the kahunas to do that. And now you're seeing an offense that's being a well-oiled machine. And why can't UCF win the last 3 games of the season, finish 7-5, and now have the quarterback and the offensive coordinator in the future ready to contend for the Big 12 next year?
Yeah, I agree. Look, they finish out with Arizona State, West Virginia, and then you'll have a big game with Utah on November 29th here at the end of the month. But you got to go to Arizona State. Now, I will tell you, as somebody who's lived in the Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale area, Arizona State's not a tough place to go play. Their students are more interested in drinking down on Mill Ave than they are the game most weeks. But this is a game that you have to go get. And I think that if you're Gus, even if he hits some bumps in the road here with play calling, you have to stick with it at this point. You can't afford to have a back and forth. Now, when he was asked about this, he pointed to needing to be more of a CEO and take care of other things and pay attention to other areas of this team that maybe needed his attention. And it seems like that worked going into Saturday. Arizona
State, as you made mention, they're 6-2 this year, so they're a pretty good team.
Big win.
It would be a huge win. And then, like you said, they finish out the season against a Utah team that was my favorite to win the Big 12. Obviously, their year is because of injuries. Didn't pan out the way it should. But I'm with you. Now, Gus, 1,000-foot view and looking down at his program and knowing this is year 4. At some point, you have your guys here. You've been here long enough for a full recruiting class. When is your team going to start contending? And I know you made a transition to a new conference, and that's going to take some time. But there's a lot of talent on this team, and a 5-game lose streak in back-to-back years is not what Gus Malzahn wanted on his resume. How do you make amends for that? Well, you got to find the right combination of offensive and defensive coordinators. You didn't have it early in the year. Right. Maybe this is an outlier for these two guys getting the job, because, again, this is not they're not 100% going to be the offense coordinator next year. He can still go out and find someone. It's kind of a test run for Tim. Why wouldn't it be him for the rest of Gus Malzahn's tenure at UCF, the way he's calling games, especially this past weekend?
Yeah, we talked about that Arizona State game. Now, we're going to talk about the opening lines on that game right after a quick word from our sponsors here. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Now, Thrift, the line on this one, the opening line on this one is... Hold on, I'm going to edit this. It didn't come up. God damn it. The opening line on this one is 4 points. They have this as a pick 'em. The over-under is 6.5. Yo, what do you like here on this one? Are you taking you taking Arizona State in the points? Are you betting the Knights?
I mean, I like Arizona State, man. And this, by the way, the coach at Arizona State, Mike, was an offensive coordinator for Gus Malzahn a few years ago. So I think nothing more than he would like to upset UCF. I'm going to go Arizona State.
All right, listen, I like the surging Knights. I think Dylan Rizk is the X factor here. But look, no matter what you're deciding to bet, go check out our friends at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Kobe Hudson returns. And he had 58 yards on the day, but he provided a lot of balance to that wide receiver room. They need playmakers down the stretch here. Now he's someone who's been with Gus for a while, dating back to Auburn. Look, man, Kobe Hudson, Jacoby Jones, Randy Pittman Jr., those guys had a really big day. I think they helped, again, open up the run game by being threats in the past for RJ Harvey to run wild. You got to like what this receiver core is doing right now.
Yeah, exactly right. And I was really high on Kobe Hudson coming out of high school. And obviously injury bug has really taken a toll on his career. But I like the way this receiving core is playing and having a healthy Kobe Hudson with the other guys and RJ Harvey and the balance of this offense. I mean, like I said, they put up 56 points against Arizona. Why can't they continue that momentum? I do want to correct myself real quick. What I was talking about with Tim Harris Jr., obviously he is the offense coordinator and got named that in January. I was talking about the play calling. Is that going to be his job for the foreseeable future? Not that he's not going to be the offensive coordinator next year. Is he still going to be calling the plays? So I needed to correct myself on that, Mike. But like you made mention, Kobe Hudson had I think a decent game coming back from injury, 55 yards. So why couldn't he build off that and get ready as he's trying to get to the next level? So I'm glad that they overcame that injury bug and seeing what happens the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like balance. Now, again, we know Gus Malzahn teams are run first. And when you have RJ Harvey, you should be run first, but you need these guys in the passing game. I think Jacoby he's turned up big, but you need the other side of that coin in Kobe Hudson. Again, I liked what I saw from these guys. And I was also struck by how much chemistry they seem to have with Dylan Rizk in his first start. Yeah,
and that is kind of mind-boggling, man, because you don't expect that.
He had been working with the ones. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Fourth string. It's not second string, and he gets some opportunities working the ones, especially during quarterback competition. Heck, even third string, fourth string. When is he going out and throwing with Hudson? When do you think that happened other than this past week, or Randy Pittman or Jacoby Jones? And now all of a sudden he's making Jacoby Jones have one of his best games in his career. We know how good Pittman is. And now with Hudson getting back healthy, again, I know this is Hudson's senior year, but you got to be happy about the fact that Rizk can come in this quickly and have chemistry with guys. Makes you think it don't matter who the receivers are next year, he'll be able to do the same thing, especially on such short notice and circumstances in a situation that it's not ideal for a four-string quarterback to come in and start. And look what the numbers he put up and did. Yeah, look, they'll have their hands full a little bit with Arizona State only allowing 209 yards per game through the air. So it's a little bit of a tough test. That's middling in the Big 12 right now, but it's still a very decent pass defense that they'll be going up against. Looking forward to seeing what those guys can do. Thrift, as always, I want to thank you for joining me today. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you. Yeah, you can find me, Sports Visions, on Facebook, also Thrift Behringer on Facebook, and Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I cannot wait for next week, because if they upset Arizona State, that's going to be the best win one of the season at 500. What a job for Dylan Rizk and Gus Malzahn if that is able to happen.
Yeah, and what a job by us here at Locked On UCF, bringing you guys lots of great content every day. Thank you for making Locked On UCF your first listen of the day. For your second listen, visit our friends over at Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll leads the conversation in conference realignment news and holds no punches when it comes to covering every team in the Big 12. Find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back at you guys tomorrow with more Locked On UCF.